we have now seen things in the clinic that no one knows worldwide. It's like we're the first one for the outer knee compartment, the lateral meniscus, to replace it in human. It has never been done before. But what I see most in startups, in the earlier startups, is that the speed of execution is underestimated. You need to go fast. You don't have 4 years of a PhD. You have until you run out of money.
What questions are investors nowadays asking that they didn't before?
I think that's the most important one. Yeah.
Welcome back to another episode of the GS MedTech Podcast, where I speak with industry leaders shaping the future of medtech. I'm Dame Medarski, and today's guest is Maarten van der Zanden, a medtech implementation leader with an engineering background who has helped launch 6 medical innovations and raised significant amount of funding by aligning evidence, market access, and commercialization strategy. He is the Chief Implementation Officer at ATRO Medical, an orthopedic startup developing an artificial meniscus prosthesis aimed at improving long-term outcomes and quality of life for knee patients. Thank you for joining me today, Maarten.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation, Dame.
So, above and beyond my brief introduction to you, maybe you can tell us, who is Maarten van der Zanden?
Who am I? Well, as you indicated, I'm really involved in implementation of medtech innovation. So I started as a mechanical engineer, graduated in biomedical engineering, and worked on medtech innovations ever since, always on medical devices over the past 20 years. Started out with designing hip implants and instrumentation myself, so taking it from ID to CE in a smaller engineering firm, but for larger orthopedic manufacturers. Found out that some things were getting shelved instead of reaching the patient, so I thought, why not? And they always said marketing. The marketing department has decided that we won't put it to patients. So I figured I had to join the marketing team. So I switched to medical marketing in a larger firm in the Netherlands, radiotherapy. And from there, I really got to know the economic side of things, how great engineering should fit with the clinical need, but also should fit with sales opportunities. And ever since, I've been working on implementation to get everything aligned to make the patient benefit from great ideas.
Very interesting. And obviously, your engineering background, I'm assuming, has helped you translate some complex clinical benefits into a compelling commercial narrative for the payers as well.
Yes. So what I found is that, complex clinical benefits are very hard to convey.
Yeah.
So I always try to make it more simple. There's also a big translation needed from the idea of a physician to an engineer. So to talk both the languages is very helpful, and then to a commercial viable product as well. So there are 2 translation steps needed. In my mind, we should always be able to explain to our family who's not an engineer or a physician what the benefit would be from an innovation. And if you can do that, and then think of, okay, so how do we put this to value to convince payers?
And in my introduction, I've mentioned that obviously you've been involved in launching 6 innovations. And sometimes innovations obviously succeed and are successful, other not so much as well. Looking back, what was the most painful lesson you learned from a product that maybe didn't meet its commercial forecasts?
Yeah, I think that was my first true startup experience. I joined a startup team while they were on the way of developing a new diagnostic test. I came from a firm with 18 sales offices worldwide. So if we would launch something, it would go big, everything would have been aligned. In hindsight, we've developed a test that was highly sensitive, very good, but just too costly. The price was too high to implement in the setting where we thought it would be. We also this was a Q fever test, which came right after a huge Q fever outbreak in the Netherlands, but all the research tied to it was kind of ended. So it was a bit too late there. So from a a clinical use perspective, this was not a good launch. In the end, we found that from a research perspective, this was a great tool, much more sensitive than available at that moment. So we pivoted it to a research use tool, and we got $1 million assignment by Department of Defense for a vaccine development in the end. So in the end, it was a success, but it was quite a struggle and was not the best launch ever.
Well, I think if anything, you learn from mistakes and you learn from obviously things that happen and you improve on the next one and the next one as well. And I'm assuming you're also following a lot of the other companies within the medtech space. And I'm curious again on this thread of maybe not everybody is succeeding. Where do you feel medtech companies most often fail between obviously getting the CE and FDA regulatory approval and then an actual clinical adoption?
Yeah, I think two things come to mind. First, have the clinician on board during the development. So you still see engineering solutions come to market without, the best clinical assessments of the need and the use. So clinical user experience is important as well. Mm-hmm. So have the clinician on board, either in your team or really connected as an ambassador to the team to assist in the launch. That's very important. And then the same mistake we made, price. I think price is, or willingness to pay, I should put it. So there's the combination of the two. They are aware, all the companies are aware of reimbursement, if it exists or not. If it doesn't exist, what's about, a benchmark price. But then you also need a sales team to put it to the physicians and users, and there should be a willingness to pay. So not only, I see that there's a mismatch between, validation of the minimal viable product, everyone loves it, but then if you put it to market with a price tag on it, will they really acquire what you've made?
And do you feel like clinical evidence is supporting that willingness to actually pay, even if it is a premium price? How do you convince someone to actually convert?
So to convert, I think you would need, you need the evidence. But I think the evidence, most of us are technically trained or medically trained. We all know about clinical evidence. So most of the time you see that it is in place to some extent. Also for regulatory approval, you will need it. So there's, I think, mostly a good amount for approval of the device. Most cases, you need more evidence for clinical adoption, right? So real world evidence comes after. So you need your early ambassadors ready, your early users, to make sure that someone starts using it and real world evidence comes out. So not just the evidence for regulatory purposes. I think that's a big, that's a big change in how you approach your customers. So suddenly you're selling.
Yeah.
And there's a big difference between a development company and a commercial company. So you should really start selling before you launch your product. And be ready.
No doubt. And you've mentioned commercial teams, you've mentioned obviously the adoption and all of that needs funding in reality of every single medtech startup. And you're very proud, and in my research on your profile, you've shared that obviously you've been involved in raising significant amount of non-dilutive funding in particular. How does that change how you build a company?
It gives comfort. So if you raise significant amounts, for example, EIC Accelerator that we got, 2.5 million is comfort. And it gives you some room towards your investors also to balance, to balance in your board. Like, yes, we've raised capital, but we also have non-dilutive funding. So what else can we do to it? It gives you some flexibility in your planning. Still, you need to make your milestones, but it gives you more comfort. You will need to make the milestones of the grant as well, and non-dilutive funding in form of a loan. Same. I think it really is important nowadays, as medtech funding is hard to get, like the equity, the venture capital.
Yeah.
So if you have a huge grant, it de-risks you on a financial aspect. And I think the financial risk of medtech startups is one of the largest risks you see. It might even be more important than technology risk. I think from a technology perspective, we iterate and we get there as an engineer, but the financial risk is huge.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt. And to be honest, I've been following medtech startups and companies that are fundraising for quite a while. And I have to say, some of them, if they didn't raise non-dilutive funding, they wouldn't be here today. and that has only kept them going until they have a little bit more traction, a little bit more, I would say, inflection points that they cover so that they actually can go and ask for equity funding as well.
Yes, and by now, for example, at ATRO Medical, so we work on the first artificial meniscus in the world, which is great from a scientific perspective. It's a challenge, it's a difficult joint, the knee joint, but we're getting there. See also that for us, it's so important to keep going on also on the non-dilutive aspect. We've raised more non-dilutive funding than equity.
Wow. So does non-dilutive capital make equity fundraising easier later on, or do investors not necessarily recognize that as part of?
It does. It is a stamp of approval, particularly the larger funds from Europe and US.
Mm-hmm.
It will be recognized. You're vetted. Your whole system has been looked at by different experts. You have the comfort of the non-dilutive funding. In most cases, it spreads over multiple years, so you'll have some of that left. Definitely, it really helps.
And what questions are investors nowadays asking that they didn't before? You've mentioned obviously the difficulties in fundraising.
That they didn't before. Are you commercial?
Yeah.
I think that's the most important one. Yeah. And then, if you're still in development, you have to say no, and you're in MedTech, it's difficult. So most funds are moving towards growth capital.
Yeah.
So being commercial and then, having some sales traction already so you can put it into an Excel model. So you can really model what, putting funding into the sales and marketing team would bring you at a later stage. I think that's what most look for. And the multipliers may be a bit lower than if you go for our case, you have a blue ocean market. You would, if this comes to market, it is a huge difference in sports medicine. But are you willing to take the development risk and the clinical risk? I think we're now at a stage that it's, our risks are reduced significantly. But I see in most startups, that's, the question is, are you commercial?
Yeah. And do you feel like they're obviously digging a little bit more deeper into reimbursement, evidence, revenue visibility? Reimbursement
is definitely looked at. State of technology, current clinical evidence is very important. Obviously, the team is very important. I think the depth of due diligence it goes much further than before.
Yeah.
Raising capital 5 years back is really it's tremendously different than nowadays.
Yeah, no doubt. I think they're feeling some financial pressures as well, and fundraising for VC is a little bit harder and more challenging for some of them. So that only translates onto a little bit more scrutiny when they invest as well. So you've touched upon ATRO Medical, but maybe you can tell us a little bit more about the business as well.
For ATRO Medical, yes, I've joined over 5 years ago to bring the first artificial meniscus to patients, to provide pain relief for all the patients that have had meniscus surgeries before, that had a meniscectomy, so part of the meniscus was removed, but they're still in chronic pain. And these are roughly 200,000 patients each year that have this disease, the post-meniscectomy pain syndrome, in the US and Europe alone. Worldwide, it's even more. Most are in their working ages, so between 35 and 55, so really contributing, willing to contribute as well, but in pain. So they lose their jobs, they quit their sports, etc. So it's really a debilitating disease, which we try to tackle by implementing a non-resorbable implant. So we just replaced the meniscus with a polycarbonate urethane implant, which is very durable, but also very flexible. So we were looking for this material to be able to function in the knee joint. So the knee joint gets like 8 times body weight sometimes. So you need something which is flexible, but also very strong. Yeah. And by now we've been able to demonstrate it clinically as well, that it works in our first in human studies, and we're getting ready for pivotal studies for approval. So getting closer to market, but also getting towards the higher funds needed to do a large group of patients as part of the evidence that we need for approval in Europe and US. So we're now raising a round. Mm-hmm. We're close to finalizing it, but it will remain open to new investors. So I invite anyone to get in touch.
Perfect. And you have a very unusual job title. You don't see that very frequently in businesses of this stage, maybe Chief Implementation Officer, maybe over a traditional Chief Commercial Officer. What does implementation actually signal to the market, and what does that entail for you?
Well, Yeah, we should have put a trademark on it. We thought we made it up ourselves, obviously. So Chief Implementation Officer, everything that touches implementation of our device. It signals that it's not the other C, commercial. So we're not commercial yet. So I think that's an important signal. It also signals that we're not only bringing a device to market, we're doing so while aligning payers on reimbursement. So we've already had roundtable discussions with the large US insurance companies, Cigna, Aetna, Blue Cross Blue Shield, CMS. We have clinicians on board. We have an advisory board that is international, European, and US. We're already in touch for implementation with Veteran Affairs, with like NFL, like former sports pros, to align all these people to get to implementation. So our goal is not to reach the market. Our goal is to have 500 patients in surgery and happily walking around with great quality of life in a paid surgery by insurance companies. Our goal is much further, to really implement it in healthcare.
Yeah. And I'm assuming for a meniscus prosthesis, the clinical endpoints are much longer term. So having that ability to say a year, 2 years, 5 years, how do you keep investors engaged when the final data is years away?
Yeah, so luckily it's not 5 years, because then we would be in trouble. No, 2 years. I think 2 years is important.
Yeah.
We know that if something happens, if you might have an adverse event, it's always in the early settings. At 2 years, you're quite certain how the trajectory will look at 5 or 10 years. So that is also what the FDA signaled to us. So 2 years is overseeable, but if you do a 2-year study, including enrollment and everything, you need 3 years in total.
Yeah.
It's a stretch, but it's still within the time frame of venture capital. We also see in our current round some interest or significant interest from informal investors, from former medtech entrepreneurs that sold their company, that have a longer time span for their investments. They also want to contribute besides just making money alone.
Yeah. And I'm curious about the actual device. Why has this synthetic meniscus actually been such a beneficial or a holy grail for patients and for medtech? How is your business, how is ATRO Medical approaching it differently to any other companies out there?
Yeah, so many have tried. No one has reached the market yet, in US at least. And US is the biggest market in orthopedics. So if you want to succeed, you'll need to go to the US. The knee joint is like a milling stone. That's, I think, the key of the problem. There's so much weight on your meniscus. If you replace something and it just doesn't fit or it's just not good enough, like our knee surgeon says, our founder says, the knee will spit it out. It will just get rid of it.
Yeah.
It will grind it. So I think it's in the design, and there we have a new material from DSM by NA that we could use. I think that's one of the biggest differences, like a new biomaterial that is available. And also we've been trying this for years. We've been at a brainstorming session on this device during my graduation project in 2006.
Wow.
And it was a 10-year academic effort, and now almost a 10-year company effort. So you need lots of iterations, so much knowledge, and there's so much knowledge now in the company that we also have new patents that recently came out. It's all because we're now in the clinic, now learning what the knee is doing, what the patient is doing with it, adjusting, making tiny adjustments. We have completely new insights. And I think by keep going at it and continuously improving, so staying alive, that is key to succeeding. And you also see our IP now is so much better, as in a sense, we have now seen things in the clinic that no one knows worldwide. It's like we're the first one for the outer knee compartment, the lateral meniscus, to replace it in human. It has never been done before. So we have the IP on it. And we've also implemented learnings there that also contribute to new IP. So you get into a position by just keeping going, training yourself, becoming better, having a physician on board. So our founder is instrumental in this. He's an orthopedic surgeon, active surgeon. So most of his time he spends in the clinic. And then he can also translate his daily learnings and make sure our surgical procedure is very practical. So you not only need a great device, you need a system that an orthopedic surgeon recognizes and knows how to do the surgery.
Yeah.
So we've trained new physicians in our lab on a cadaver, and they instantly said, oh, okay, it's like this. Oh, it resembles other surgery. Okay, so it is simple. And I think that's, so it's not only the device, it's the fixation, it's the surgical approach, it's the instrumentation set is now just a bit different from industry standards because it's even better now for more visibility. All these tiny improvements give great clinical results in the end, but you need to keep going.
And how do you pivot a surgeon that you present this to and they maybe become a clinical advisor to then a commercial champion and someone that actually promotes the device alongside you?
Yeah, here the data comes in. So yes, presenting data that looks great, that shows pain relief, a low risk to the patient, so no adverse events, that these are important there. And having a feel. So there's a difference between people I've spoke to online and those we met physically, where they can feel the flexibility of the implant, see a sawbone where we have the surgery, that he can try it, for example. And so physical interaction is important.
Yeah. Now, you touched upon the biggest market, obviously being the US. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit more in terms of the regulatory stage of ATRO Medical at the moment.
So from regulatory wise, we have FDA breakthrough designation. So that helps in getting in touch with the FDA and having rapid responses. It also signals to the market that there's a big clinical unmet need. So this was important to us. We've had 5 pre-submissions so far. So you can ask 3-4 questions to the FDA for an answer to get them to review your preclinical data, but also your pivotal protocol. So that has been very helpful. And I think the way that has been done in the US is helpful to medical device teams. We lack that in Europe with under MDR. There now is a clinical pathway review that you could do, but it's all a bit more hesitant. It's more difficult. Notified bodies are very busy. In the US, the FDA has laws they need to abide to. So within a certain amount of days, they have to respond, and you have a meeting with them. And that is very helpful. So for us, we're now moving to the pivotal study with a large part of preclinical evidence already agreed and seen by the FDA, some things we need to do, and then we'll discuss the pivotal study also on the parameters. And I think that's very helpful. That they will not say, if you pass this threshold, you will get a 510K de novo for sure, but the level of certainty is much higher than under MDR. Because it's less vague what you need to do.
Okay. And you've mentioned 510K, but I'm assuming being a breakthrough device, this will be a de novo.
Yeah, 510K de novo is where we aim for. Yeah. So we do not have to do a PMA, luckily. We are a 2B device, so we can do a 510K de novo.
And when do you anticipate to start commercialization?
When or where?
When
so
and where?
Where is the US and Europe? So we hope to submit, the same clinical evidence for US and Europe at the same time, and I think that will be aligned. Yeah. So we could launch first in the US, and by the end of 29 is when we target FDA clearance, so in 2030 to go commercial.
And the round that you're raising at the moment, will that cover you all the way to commercialization? Is that the plan?
No, at this moment, what we are raising and almost finalizing is the IDE clearance. So get the FDA to clear us for study use in the US. Yeah. So you need that's a big step. So that's a huge milestone as well. And a value inflection point. So IDE is what will be covered, the whole preclinical work and additional clinical work. So we have 2 ongoing studies where we can add patients, and the more clinical data that we have prior to the pivotal gives us more certainty on the statistics and so also on the outcome in the end.
Awesome. Very exciting times. And I'm assuming this is where you've mentioned the 500 paying patients fitting in?
Well, that is the final goal. So we'll hope to have patients under reimbursement. That's a longer term plan, because I think you will have the first adoption, obviously, in private clinics. If this works so well, they will directly start using it. It's instant use. We also see traction with veterans. So veteran clinics in the US are large. They have almost 20 million people in VA payment structures, so insurance structures. So this is a huge group that can make their own reimbursement decisions. So for us, that's also a very important market to look at, and then to convince CMS for a small part, because we go up to 70 years old. So only the age range between 66 and 70 are eligible for the device and for Medicare.
Yeah.
But as you know, a positive Medicare reimbursement gives you a higher chance of getting the private health insurance to pay as well.
But that's, having reimbursement sorted on a breakthrough device, that's a very significant step closer to obviously a successful launch.
It will accelerate the launch. So yes, we'll launch instantly. And there's also new things are going on in the US, right? So there are still efforts being made to have FDA breakthrough devices that come to market, have instant payments for a certain portion, or and we'll focus on these efforts as well.
And obviously, you've been involved in the business for quite a while for a smaller company, and I appreciate you're not at a massive growth stage at the moment, but I'm assuming you need to add talent and people every now and again as well, and to complement the lack of skills and expertise that you have internally as well. Maybe you can tell us, in your hiring experience and in your obviously involvement in other companies, what is the hardest role that you can think of that needs to be filled in a medtech startup?
Yeah, in a medtech startup. So I'm also a business coach to a number of startups.
Yeah.
It depends on the stage you're at. In our stage, I think, when you have your, let's say, the core team set, for us hiring, internationally, I think that's the big step now. So looking for a US clinical research director or something, or that is our next step.
Mm-hmm.
What has been difficult is having all the expertise that you need in-house. So you will need to rely on consultants, but sometimes, for example, a CFO, we're too small to get a CFO, but a fractional CFO, they change jobs quite frequently. So it's hard to tie them to the company. Yeah. So CFO is a difficult role, for example, for us. If I look to the earlier startups, it's really the founding team. Most have come from, for example, a PhD surrounding, where one of the PhDs, all of them agree that it's a great idea, but just one takes a step towards the business. And then how to find your co-founder, because I think you'll need someone along your side. So for the early stage, co-founders, and then the first engineer that can do it all, that has some experience with quality, is a true engineer, understands clinical evidence, and that type of, you always need people. So any function that we have in our company as well, everyone is responsible for a number of fields. Like I'm, responsible for marketing, branding, but also regulatory, also fundraising, and then also some of the other stuff. It's always like that in the startup, and you need people that are not just focused on this one thing, because everything needs to get done in the end.
That's the significant difference between bigger corporations and startups, to be honest. I think you need to be prepared to roll up your sleeves and make sure that you get things done, rather than delegate and expect that there will be someone to actually do that job for you.
Yes, I think that's correct. The benefit of your larger companies is that you have a team with other experts surrounding you as well. So it's more easy, in my experience, to have your internal sparring partner on, for example, project management. I've been a product manager, where you can align, how you do things. In a startup, it's more solitary. You are the expert. So everyone will look at you. If you want to have a sparring partner, you go to other startups and discuss sometimes.
Yeah.
So it's very helpful to be in some kind of ecosystem like we have with TechLeap, but also from your investors. Sometimes you have some co-investments or other companies they invested in. that you can align with that look like you, but it's always a bit different. So I think that is the hard part of being in a startup. You are the expert. Do it.
And you also mentioned that you're coaching startups as well. And maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that experience. And in particular, what is the biggest blind spot most first-time founders have regarding their business model? Ideally, I'm not sure what experience you have with MedTech founders, but if you can align it with that, that would be great too.
Yeah, it's mostly MedTech that I do the coaching on. So I'm also part of the Faculty of Impact in the Netherlands, coach for OostNL, and primarily focused on MedTech. So the biggest blind spot in business cases, it differs. And it differs with personality from the founder. You see the typical PhDs that became CEO but are more the CTO of the company. You also see like the true CEOs, I think, that have like the multidisciplinary approach, and these are the ones that will succeed in the end, I think. The CTOs perhaps as well, but they need a co-founder in most cases, I would say. The blind spot is making milestones, I think. It's perhaps not a blind spot because everyone knows, so they put it in their slide decks. But then same goes for us. Making your milestones is the hardest part, and for ATRO as well. You have always more goals than you might be able to achieve. But what I see most in startups, in the earlier startups, is that the speed of execution is underestimated. That you need to go fast, so you can't do everything in the most scientific way that you're used to. You don't have 4 years of a PhD. You have until you run out of money.
And that's a very realistic
fundraise at the same time. So it's also this ambidextrousness. You have to work on the things for today. You have to keep an eye on your, let's say, 18-month milestone for the funding, and you have to keep the long-term goals in mind. How you get to the patient, to an exit, to whatever you want to achieve. So you have like 3 levels of awareness and goal setting. And that's sometimes also confusing to a team. You say, what? But why are you working this? We need to get this done. Yes, we do, but we also need to keep track of this a bit later on. And then in 5 years from now, we need to be there. So that means that if we go this direction, it's wrong. We need to go the other direction now, today.
And you're definitely right. It takes a particular character and behavior to look at that more strategically and longer term. And that's why some founders are good CEOs and others are not. But at the same time, it's the realization that fundraising is a full-time job on its own. And a lot of founders need to do it in conjunction with running a company, building a product, getting to a design freeze, worrying about the regulatory process and everything else along the lines.
Yeah, and there you need a good board, I think. So if you align with your board, it helps. So they will keep you on this more, put the helicopter view to you and challenge you on that as well. But it is a challenge, obviously. Yes.
Yeah, no doubt.
And fundraising, yes, it is a full-time job. On the other hand, it can be a full-time job because you have all these other things to do. So it's not a full-time job.
Yeah.
But it's something that has to be in your mind all the time.
All the time.
So how does it contribute to my fundraising? Who can we trigger with this piece of data? Is there a foundation perhaps that is more focused on a particular detail? So also on a different type of investors. So we have VCs, we have informals, family offices, and then other investors as well. So they all want something a bit different, and you have to keep your eyes open for evidence that it could help in getting them in.
Yeah. So talking about fundraising and investors, for the investors in our audience and the ones that are watching the podcast, if they want to participate in the tail end of your current round, what is the one milestone they should be most excited about in the next 12 months?
Yeah, we've seen the first snip recently, but our 1-year data on our lateral device and the whole clinical data. So we keep adding patients to our studies, but our lateral device in the outer knee compartment, where there's a huge clinical need. So if you have issues on the inner side of your knee joint, you slowly degrade. If it's on the outer part of the knee, it goes very fast. So these patients are in definitely within, let's say, 2 years in chronic pain, and this is severe chronic pain. They do so well already at 6 weeks. It's incredible. So I think, our clinical data speaks for itself now. And so this is I would say a prime time. So the current investor round we'll close it, but we'll keep it open for 6 months for others to join in.
Yeah.
The valuation is modest, as you see in most medtech companies at this moment, but the data is getting out, and this is speaking to other firms. So we'll meet with the large strategic partners in March in the US with, let's say, the 4 largest orthopedic firms that might be an exit partner. They're all interested. We have 2 appointments already with the C-suite. So the evidence speaks for itself. And then moving towards clinical data. So second milestone is our whole preclinical work. We get that done in a sense that it's very useful for the FDA, and they acknowledge it. Then you have some check marks that are very important to get ID clearance. So we will move towards ID clearance, and I think clinical data in combination with ID clearance will be a huge value inflection point.
So I'll definitely make sure to tag you and include contact details when I share the podcast. So if any investors are interested, they can reach out directly to you.
Yeah, reach out. You're welcome.
Well, Maarten, thank you so much. It's been very interesting and educating for me, I have to say. So I very much appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me on the podcast, and it's been a pleasure.
Appreciate it.